Question 1. The evaluation methodology shows that a real estate licensee in Hawaii is representing a seller in the sale of a residential property. During the listing period, the licensee learns that a close friend of theirs, who is also a licensed real estate agent but not affiliated with the licensee's brokerage, is interested in purchasing the property for their client. The licensee's friend indicates that their client is eager to close quickly and may be willing to pay a premium for a swift transaction, and the licensee believes they could facilitate a quick sale to their friend's client, potentially leading to a higher commission for themselves through a referral fee from their friend, in addition to their seller's commission. What is the most ethically sound and legally compliant course of action for the licensee to take? Option A. Proceed with presenting the offer to the seller without any disclosure regarding their relationship with the buyer's agent or the potential for a referral fee, believing that the seller will be satisfied with the sale price and terms. Option B. Advise the seller that the offer from the buyer's agent is the best they are likely to receive, focusing on the quick closing, but omit any mention of the licensee's personal relationship with the buyer's agent or the potential for a referral fee. Option C. Immediately disclose their relationship with the interested buyer's agent to the seller, explain the potential for a referral fee, and advise the seller on how this situation might impact the negotiation and their best interests, allowing the seller to decide how to proceed. Option D. Subtly encourage the seller to accept the offer quickly, highlighting the speed of the potential closing, without explicitly mentioning the licensee's personal connection to the buyer's agent or the possibility of a referral fee, assuming the seller will be pleased with a fast sale. The correct answer is C. Immediately disclose their relationship with the interested buyer's agent to the seller, explain the potential for a referral fee, and advise the seller on how this situation might impact the negotiation and their best interests, allowing the seller to decide how to proceed. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows that navigating ethical dilemmas in real estate transactions requires a deep understanding of professional conduct and Hawaii's specific real estate laws and regulations. This scenario is professionally challenging because it pits a licensee's duty to their client against the potential for a lucrative deal, creating a conflict of interest that, if mishandled, can lead to severe legal and ethical repercussions. The licensee must exercise careful judgment to uphold their fiduciary responsibilities and maintain public trust. The best professional approach involves prioritizing the client's best interests above all else and disclosing any potential conflicts of interest immediately and transparently. This means advising the seller on the implications of the buyer's offer, including any potential downsides or risks, and allowing the seller to make an informed decision. This aligns with the principles of fiduciary duty, which require loyalty, obedience, disclosure, confidentiality, accounting, and reasonable care, as mandated by Hawaii Revised Statutes Chapter 467 and the associated administrative rules. Specifically, licensees have a duty to deal honestly and fairly with all parties in a transaction, and to avoid misrepresentation or concealment of material facts, an approach that involves subtly encouraging the seller to accept the offer without fully disclosing the licensee's personal connection to the buyer or the potential for a quick resale at a higher price is ethically flawed. This constitutes a failure of the duty of disclosure and potentially misrepresentation, as the seller is not receiving all material information necessary to make an informed decision. It also creates a conflict of interest where the licensee's personal gain may be prioritized over the client's best interests, violating the duty of loyalty. Another unacceptable approach is to proceed with the transaction without any disclosure, assuming the seller will be happy with the sale price. This is a direct violation of the duty of disclosure and honesty. The licensee is withholding crucial information that could influence the seller's decision-making process and is acting in a manner that is not transparent, thereby breaching ethical standards and potentially violating Hawaii's real estate laws. Finally, an approach that involves advising the seller that the offer is the best they will receive, without mentioning the licensee's relationship with the buyer or the buyer's intentions, is also professionally unacceptable. This is a form of misrepresentation by omission and a breach of the duty of loyalty and disclosure. The licensee is actively misleading the seller to facilitate a deal that benefits the licensee personally, rather than acting solely in the seller's best interest. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying the ethical issue and potential conflicts of interest. They should then consult relevant professional codes of conduct and state regulations, such as Hawaii's real estate licensing laws and administrative rules. Next, they should consider the impact of each potential course of action on all parties involved, particularly their client. Open and honest communication, coupled with a commitment to transparency and the client's best interests, should guide the final decision. Question 2. The efficiency study reveals that a real estate licensee in Honolulu, Hawaii, is preparing to list a single-family residence for sale. The property is located in a well-established neighborhood with numerous comparable homes that have recently sold, are currently on the market, or have expired listings. The licensee is considering which property valuation method would be most appropriate and reliable for advising the seller on an appropriate listing price, ensuring compliance with Hawaii's real estate licensing laws and ethical obligations. Option A. Utilizing the income approach by estimating the potential rental income the property could generate and applying a capitalization rate. Option B. Employing the cost approach by calculating the cost to replace the home, subtracting depreciation, and adding the value of the land. Option C. Performing a comparative market analysis by examining recent sales of similar properties, current listings, and expired listings in the immediate vicinity. Option D. Relying on a broad assessment of general neighborhood property values without specific property comparisons. The correct answer is C. Performing a comparative market analysis by examining recent sales of similar properties, current listings, and expired listings in the immediate vicinity. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because a real estate licensee in Hawaii must select the most appropriate property valuation method based on the specific characteristics of the property and the purpose of the valuation, while adhering to Hawaii's real estate licensing laws and ethical standards. Misapplication of a valuation method can lead to inaccurate pricing, potentially harming clients and violating professional duties. Careful judgment is required to ensure the chosen method provides a reliable estimate of market value. The most appropriate approach in this scenario is the comparative market analysis. This method is best suited for residential properties like the one described because it directly reflects current market conditions by comparing the subject property to similar recently sold, currently listed, and expired listings in the same geographic area. Hawaii real estate licensees are ethically and legally obligated under Hawaii Revised Statutes Chapter 467 and associated administrative rules to provide competent service. A comparative market analysis, when performed correctly, is a standard and accepted practice for estimating the market value of residential properties, aligning with the duty of care owed to clients. It is a practical and widely understood method that directly addresses the principle of substitution, where a buyer will not pay more for a property than they would for a comparable substitute. Using the income approach would be inappropriate and professionally unsound for a single-family residence. This method is designed for income-producing properties, such as apartment buildings or commercial spaces, where the value is derived from the potential rental income. Applying it to a home primarily occupied by its owner ignores the fundamental nature of the property's value drivers and would likely result in a misleading valuation, failing to meet the standard of competence required by Hawaii law. Similarly, the cost approach is generally not the best method for a typical single-family home in an established market. While it can be useful for unique or new construction properties, it relies on estimating the cost to replace the property, less depreciation, plus land value. For older homes, accurately estimating depreciation can be highly subjective and difficult, leading to less reliable results compared to market-based methods. Furthermore, it doesn't directly reflect what a buyer is willing to pay in the current market, which is the essence of market value. Relying solely on this method for a standard residential property could be seen as a failure to employ the most relevant and accurate valuation technique available, potentially violating the licensee's duty to provide accurate information. The professional decision-making process for similar situations involves first understanding the client's objective for the valuation, e.g., listing a property for sale, understanding investment potential. Then, the licensee must assess the property type and its primary use. For residential properties, the comparative market analysis is almost always the primary and most reliable method. If the property has unique characteristics or is income-producing, the licensee must then consider the applicability and limitations of the income approach or cost approach, often using them in conjunction with the comparative market analysis for a more comprehensive understanding, but never as a replacement for the most market-relevant method. Adherence to Hawaii's real estate regulations and ethical codes, which emphasize competence and client best interests, should guide the selection and application of any valuation method. Question 3. Operational review demonstrates that a seller in Honolulu, Hawaii, is pressuring their listing broker to omit a known, significant roof leak from the property disclosure statement, stating that they want to get the deal done quickly, and that any buyer can discover it during their inspection. The broker is aware of the leak and its potential impact on the property's value and habitability. Which of the following actions best upholds the broker's professional and legal responsibilities in Hawaii? Option A. Agree to the seller's request and omit the roof leak from the disclosure statement, relying on the buyer's inspection contingency to uncover the issue. Option B. Inform the seller that they are solely responsible for all disclosures and proceed with the sale without further comment on the roof leak. Option C. Advise the seller that all known material defects, including the roof leak, must be disclosed on the property disclosure statement as required by Hawaii law, and explain the legal ramifications of non-disclosure. Option D. Suggest to the seller that they can disclose the leak as a minor issue or needs attention to satisfy the disclosure requirement without fully detailing its significance. Correct answer is C. Advise the seller that all known material defects, including the roof leak, must be disclosed on the property disclosure statement as required by Hawaii law, and explain the legal ramifications of non-disclosure. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the potential conflict between a seller's desire to expedite a sale and the broker's fiduciary duty to ensure all material facts are disclosed. The broker must navigate the seller's instructions while upholding their legal and ethical obligations under Hawaii real estate law, specifically concerning disclosure requirements. Failure to disclose known material defects can lead to significant legal repercussions for both the broker and the seller, including potential lawsuits and disciplinary action from the Hawaii Real Estate Commission. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves the broker advising the seller that they have a legal obligation to disclose all known material defects to prospective buyers, regardless of the seller's preference to omit this information to expedite the sale. This approach aligns directly with Hawaii Revised Statutes, Chapter 467, and the associated administrative rules, which mandate full and truthful disclosure of all material facts that could affect a buyer's decision. A material defect is generally defined as a condition that would significantly impact the property's value or desirability. The broker's role is to facilitate the transaction while protecting all parties by ensuring transparency and adherence to the law. This includes educating the seller on their disclosure obligations and the potential consequences of non-disclosure. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves the broker agreeing to the seller's request and omitting the known material defects from the disclosure statement. This directly violates Hawaii's disclosure laws, which require brokers to ensure that all material facts known to them are disclosed to potential buyers. Such an action constitutes a breach of fiduciary duty and can result in severe penalties, including license suspension or revocation. Another incorrect approach is for the broker to simply inform the seller that they are responsible for disclosures, and then proceed with the sale without further engagement or advice. While the seller ultimately signs the disclosure, the broker has an affirmative duty to ensure the disclosure is complete and accurate to the best of their knowledge. Merely passing the responsibility without providing guidance or ensuring compliance is insufficient and can still expose the broker to liability if they were aware of undisclosed material defects. A further incorrect approach is for the broker to suggest that the buyer's inspection contingency will cover any undisclosed issues. While inspections are crucial, they are not a substitute for the seller's mandatory disclosure of known defects. The disclosure statement is intended to provide buyers with information upfront, allowing them to make informed decisions about whether to proceed with an inspection or even make an offer. Relying solely on the inspection contingency to uncover all material defects is a misinterpretation of the disclosure process and a failure to meet the broker's legal obligations. Professional reasoning. Professionals in this situation should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes legal compliance and ethical conduct. This involves 1. Identifying the core legal and ethical obligations, e.g., disclosure requirements under Hawaii law. 2. Assessing the specific facts of the situation, e.g., Seller's instructions, nature of the defect. 3. Consulting relevant statutes and regulations. Hawaii Revised Statutes Chapter 467. 4. Communicating clearly and professionally with the client, explaining legal duties and potential consequences. 5. Recommending and implementing the legally compliant and ethically sound course of action. In cases of conflict, the broker must adhere to the law, even if it means advising the seller against their preferred but unlawful course of action. Question 4. Market research demonstrates that buyers in Hawaii are increasingly concerned about the long-term implications of past property issues. A seller in Honolulu instructs their listing broker not to disclose a significant plumbing leak that occurred 2 years ago, which was repaired at considerable expense, but has left the seller feeling embarrassed. The broker knows the repair was extensive and involved replacing a substantial portion of the original piping. What is the broker's most appropriate course of action to comply with Hawaii real estate law and ethical standards? Option A. Advise the seller that the past plumbing issue, given the extent of the repair, is likely a material fact that must be disclosed to potential buyers under Hawaii Revised Statutes Chapter 507E, and explain the legal and ethical consequences of non-disclosure, recommending disclosure. Option B. Disclose to potential buyers that there was a minor plumbing issue in the past, without providing specific details about the leak or the extensive repairs. Option C. Inform the seller that they are not obligated to disclose the plumbing issue because it has been repaired and is therefore no longer a concern for buyers. Option D. Respect the seller's wishes and refrain from mentioning the plumbing issue to any potential buyers, assuming that since it was repaired, it is no longer a material fact. The correct answer is A. Advise the seller that the past plumbing issue, given the extent of the repair, is likely a material fact that must be disclosed to potential buyers under Hawaii Revised Statutes Chapter 507E, and explain the legal and ethical consequences of non-disclosure, recommending disclosure. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a real estate broker in Hawaii to navigate the complexities of disclosing material facts to potential buyers, while also respecting the seller's desire for privacy regarding a past, non-structural issue. The broker must balance their fiduciary duty to the buyer with the seller's instructions, ensuring compliance with Hawaii's real estate disclosure laws and ethical obligations. The core tension lies in determining what constitutes a material fact that must be disclosed, even if the seller wishes it to remain private. The correct approach involves a thorough understanding and application of Hawaii Revised Statutes, HRS, Chapter 507E, specifically concerning disclosure of material facts. This approach prioritizes transparency and the buyer's right to informed decision-making. It requires the broker to assess whether the past plumbing issue, even if repaired, could reasonably affect the property's value or desirability. If the repair was significant, involved potential future issues, or if there's any doubt about its complete resolution and impact, disclosure is mandated. The broker should advise the seller that disclosure is likely required by law and ethical practice, and if the seller refuses, the broker may need to withdraw from representing them to avoid violating their duties. This aligns with the principle that a broker's duty to disclose material facts supersedes a seller's desire for non-disclosure when those facts impact the property's value or the buyer's decision. An incorrect approach would be to simply honor the seller's request to withhold information about the past plumbing issue without independent assessment. This fails to acknowledge the broker's legal obligation under HRS Chapter 507E to disclose material facts. The seller's desire for privacy does not override the buyer's right to know about conditions that could affect their investment. Another incorrect approach would be to disclose the information without first discussing it with the seller and attempting to reach a mutually agreeable solution, potentially damaging the seller relationship unnecessarily. However, primary failure in this instance is the failure to disclose a potentially material fact. A third incorrect approach would be to disclose the information in a vague or misleading manner, which would also violate the spirit and letter of disclosure laws, as it would not provide the buyer with sufficient clarity to make an informed decision. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with identifying their legal and ethical obligations under Hawaii law. This involves understanding the definition of material fact and its implications. When faced with a conflict between a seller's wishes and disclosure requirements, the broker must prioritize legal compliance and fiduciary duty to the buyer. This often involves open communication with the seller, explaining the legal ramifications of non-disclosure and seeking their cooperation. If cooperation is not forthcoming, the broker must be prepared to take appropriate action, which may include advising the seller to disclose, or, in extreme cases, withdrawing from the transaction to avoid violating their professional responsibilities. Question 5. Strategic planning requires a Hawaii real estate broker to possess a comprehensive understanding of the nature of real estate. Which of the following best encapsulates the fundamental definition and importance of real estate in the context of the Hawaiian market? Option A. Real estate is a tangible asset with significant economic, social, and community development implications, serving as a cornerstone for wealth creation and investment. Option B. Real estate is primarily a commodity to be traded for profit, with its value determined solely by immediate market demand and supply dynamics. Option C. Real estate is a speculative investment vehicle, best utilized for short-term gains through rapid buying and selling. Option D. Real estate is simply a personal possession, with its importance limited to the individual owner's immediate use and enjoyment. The correct answer is A. Real estate is a tangible asset with significant economic, social, and community development implications, serving as a cornerstone for wealth creation and investment. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a real estate broker in Hawaii to understand the fundamental definition and importance of real estate beyond mere property transactions. The broker must grasp how real estate functions as an economic asset, a source of wealth, and a critical component of community development, all within the specific legal and economic context of Hawaii. This understanding is crucial for providing informed advice to clients and for upholding professional ethical standards. The best approach involves recognizing real estate as a multifaceted asset with significant economic and social implications. This perspective allows a broker to offer comprehensive guidance, considering not only the immediate sale or purchase, but also the long-term value, investment potential, and community impact. This aligns with the principles of responsible real estate practice, emphasizing client education and informed decision-making, which are implicitly supported by Hawaii's real estate licensing laws that aim to protect the public by ensuring brokers possess adequate knowledge and competence. An approach that solely focuses on the transactional aspects of real estate, viewing it merely as a commodity to be bought and sold, fails to acknowledge its broader economic and social importance. This narrow view can lead to inadequate client advice, potentially overlooking crucial factors like market trends, investment strategies, or the impact of property on local communities. Such a limited understanding could be seen as a failure to meet the professional standards expected of a licensed broker in Hawaii, potentially violating duties of care and diligence. Another incorrect approach is to consider real estate solely as a personal possession, without regard for its economic or community role. This perspective neglects the significant financial and societal implications of real estate transactions. A broker operating under this assumption would likely fail to provide clients with a complete picture of the market, investment opportunities, or the responsibilities associated with property ownership, thereby not fulfilling their fiduciary duties. Finally, viewing real estate as a purely speculative venture, driven solely by short-term market fluctuations, overlooks its fundamental role as a stable asset and a cornerstone of community infrastructure. This approach can lead to risky advice and a failure to consider the long-term stability and value that real estate provides to individuals and the Hawaiian economy. Professionals should adopt a decision-making process that begins with a thorough understanding of the core definition and importance of real estate as an asset class and a community resource. This foundational knowledge should then be applied to client interactions, ensuring that advice is comprehensive, ethically sound, and compliant with Hawaii's real estate regulations, which prioritize consumer protection and professional integrity. Question 6. Strategic planning requires a Hawaii real estate broker to advise a buyer on financing options. Which of the following approaches best ensures the buyer makes an informed decision while adhering to professional and regulatory standards in Hawaii? Option A. Suggesting the buyer pursue financing from a lender known for aggressive collection tactics, as they often offer quick approvals. Option B. Recommending a specific lender based on a personal referral fee arrangement, without exploring other lenders or the buyer's specific financial situation. Option C. Highlighting only the financing option with the lowest advertised interest rate, assuming it will be the most beneficial for the buyer. Option D. presenting a comprehensive overview of all viable financing options, detailing their respective interest rates, fees, terms, and potential risks, allowing the buyer to make a fully informed choice. The correct answer is D. Presenting a comprehensive overview of all viable financing options, detailing their respective interest rates, fees, terms, and potential risks, allowing the buyer to make a fully informed choice. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a real estate broker in Hawaii to navigate the complexities of financing options, while ensuring full disclosure and adherence to Hawaii's specific real estate laws and regulations. The broker must balance the client's immediate needs with the long-term implications of the financing structure, all while maintaining ethical standards and avoiding misrepresentation. The potential for undisclosed fees or unfavorable terms necessitates a thorough and transparent approach. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves thoroughly explaining all available financing options, including the associated costs, terms, and potential risks, to the buyer. This approach ensures the buyer is fully informed and can make a decision aligned with their financial capabilities and goals. Specifically, under Hawaii Revised Statutes Chapter 507D, Uniform Electronic Transactions Act, and General Principles of Agency Law governing real estate licensees, a broker has a fiduciary duty to act in the best interest of their client. This includes providing accurate and complete information regarding financing, as it is a material fact directly impacting the transaction. Transparency about all fees, interest rates, loan terms, and any potential penalties is paramount to fulfilling this duty and complying with disclosure requirements. Incorrect approaches analysis. Presenting only the financing option with the lowest advertised interest rate without disclosing all associated fees or the full loan term is ethically problematic and potentially violates Hawaii's disclosure laws. This misleads the buyer by omitting crucial information that could significantly alter their perception of the loan's true cost. Recommending a specific lender solely based on a referral fee, without a comprehensive evaluation of other options or the buyer's best interests, constitutes a conflict of interest and breaches the fiduciary duty owed to the client. This prioritizes the broker's gain over the client's welfare, suggesting the buyer obtain financing from a lender known for aggressive collection practices, without informing the buyer of this reputation or exploring less risky alternatives, demonstrates a failure to act in the client's best interest and could lead to significant financial hardship for the buyer, violating ethical obligations. Professional reasoning. Professionals should always prioritize informed consent and client welfare. This involves a systematic process of understanding the client's needs, thoroughly researching and presenting all viable options, clearly explaining the pros and cons of each, and ensuring all material facts, including costs and risks, are disclosed. When dealing with financing, brokers must act as educators and advisors, empowering clients to make sound financial decisions rather than pushing them towards specific outcomes for personal benefit. Adherence to Hawaii's real estate licensing laws and ethical codes of conduct should guide every step of the transaction. Question 7. Strategic planning requires a real estate broker in Hawaii to advise a client on a residential lease agreement. The client expresses a desire for maximum flexibility, stating they want the option to transition to a month-to-month tenancy after the initial fixed term of the lease expires, without needing a new lease agreement. What is the most appropriate course of action for the broker to take in advising this client, considering Hawaii's landlord-tenant laws? Option A. Advise the client that they have the unilateral right to convert the lease to a month-to-month basis at their own discretion once the initial fixed term concludes. Option B. Suggest that the client stop paying rent after the initial term, as this will automatically trigger a month-to-month tenancy and signal their intent to vacate if the landlord does not agree to the new terms. Option C. Explain the standard terms of a fixed-term lease in Hawaii, detailing the legal implications and the necessity of a formal amendment or new agreement to alter the tenancy arrangement after the initial term, and advise the client that such flexibility would require landlord consent and potentially a new addendum. Option D. Assure the client that they can simply transition to a month-to-month arrangement after the fixed term expires, as this is a common practice and landlords usually permit it. The correct answer is C. Explain the standard terms of a fixed-term lease in Hawaii, detailing the legal implications and the necessity of a formal amendment or new agreement to alter the tenancy arrangement after the initial term, and advise the client that such flexibility would require landlord consent and potentially a new addendum. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge for real estate brokers in Hawaii, navigating the nuances of lease agreements to ensure both client satisfaction and legal compliance. The professional challenge lies in accurately advising a client on the implications of different lease terms, particularly when a client expresses a desire for flexibility that might conflict with standard lease provisions or Hawaii's landlord-tenant laws. Misinterpreting or misrepresenting lease terms can lead to disputes, financial losses, and potential disciplinary action from the Hawaii Real Estate Commission. Careful judgment is required to balance client desires with legal obligations and ethical responsibilities. Correct approach analysis. The best approach involves thoroughly explaining the standard terms and conditions of a typical Hawaii residential lease agreement, highlighting the inherent limitations on flexibility for both landlord and tenant. This includes detailing the fixed term, rent payment schedules, maintenance responsibilities, and conditions for early termination as defined by Hawaii Revised Statutes, Chapter 521, Residential Landlord-Tenant Code. The broker must then clearly communicate that any deviation from these standard terms, such as a request for month-to-month tenancy after a fixed term without a specific addendum or landlord agreement, would require explicit negotiation and amendment to the lease, subject to landlord approval and potential legal implications under Hawaii law. This approach prioritizes accurate information, transparency, and adherence to statutory requirements, ensuring the client understands the legal framework governing their lease. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach is to simply agree to the client's request for a month-to-month arrangement without fully explaining the legal framework and the need for a formal amendment. This fails to educate the client on the binding nature of the initial lease and the potential complications of informal agreements, which could be challenged under Hawaii landlord-tenant law. It also risks misrepresenting the lease terms, potentially leading to disputes if the landlord later insists on the original fixed term. Another incorrect approach is to suggest that the client can unilaterally convert the lease to month at their discretion. This is a direct contravention of the contractual obligations established in a fixed-term lease and ignores the legal protections afforded to landlords under Hawaii law. Such advice would be professionally negligent and could expose the broker to liability. A third incorrect approach is to advise the client to simply stop paying rent after the initial term, assuming it automatically converts to month. This is a highly risky and legally unsound strategy. In Hawaii, a landlord is not obligated to accept rent after a fixed term expires if they intend to regain possession of the property. This action could lead to eviction proceedings and significant legal consequences for the tenant, and the broker providing such advice would be acting unethically and potentially illegally. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a client-centered, yet legally grounded decision-making process. This involves actively listening to the client's needs and desires, then cross-referencing those with the applicable regulatory framework, in this case, Hawaii Revised Statutes Chapter 521. The process requires clear, transparent communication of legal realities, potential risks, and available options, always prioritizing compliance and ethical conduct. When a client's request conflicts with legal requirements or standard practice, the professional's duty is to educate, advise on lawful alternatives, and facilitate informed decision-making, rather than simply agreeing to potentially problematic requests. Question 8. The risk matrix shows a property manager in Honolulu, Hawaii, receiving a request from a long-term tenant to make a significant structural alteration to the interior of their leased single-family home. The tenant proposes to remove a non-load-bearing wall to create a more open living space. What is the most appropriate course of action for the property manager to take under Hawaii's landlord-tenant regulations? Option A. Approve the alteration based on the tenant's description, assuming it is a minor change that will not affect the property's overall condition or marketability. Option B. Inform the tenant that any structural alterations are strictly prohibited by the lease agreement and their request cannot be considered. Option C. Obtain detailed plans and specifications for the proposed alteration from the tenant. Consult with the property owner to discuss the potential impact on property value and any necessary permits, and then provide a recommendation to the owner for their final decision. Option D. Immediately approve the tenant's request, trusting their assurance that the alteration will be performed professionally and will enhance the living space. The correct answer is C. Obtain detailed plans and specifications for the proposed alteration from the tenant. Consult with the property owner to discuss the potential impact on property value and any necessary permits, and then provide a recommendation to the owner for their final decision. Explanation. The risk matrix shows a property manager facing a common dilemma in Hawaii's rental market. A tenant requests a significant alteration to a rental property that could impact its value and future marketability. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the tenant's desire for customization with the property owner's financial interests and legal obligations under Hawaii Revised Statutes, HRS. Chapter 521, the Landlord and Tenant Code, and potentially HRS Chapter 467, the Real Estate Broker and Salesperson Law, if the property manager is licensed. The property manager must act as a fiduciary to the owner while also adhering to fair housing principles and ensuring the property remains in good condition. Careful judgment is required to assess the feasibility, legality, and financial implications of the proposed alteration. The best approach involves a thorough assessment of the proposed alteration's impact on the property's value, structural integrity, and compliance with Hawaii building codes and landlord-tenant laws. This includes obtaining detailed plans from the tenant, consulting with qualified professionals, e.g., contractors, structural engineers if necessary, and presenting a comprehensive analysis to the property owner for a final decision. This approach is correct because it upholds the property manager's fiduciary duty to the owner by prioritizing the preservation and enhancement of the property's value. It also ensures compliance with all relevant Hawaii statutes, such as HRS Chapter 521, which governs the landlord-tenant relationship and requires that landlords maintain the premises in a habitable condition and that tenants do not unreasonably alter the property. By seeking owner approval based on a well-researched recommendation, the property manager acts ethically and professionally. An approach that involves immediately approving the tenant's request without consulting the owner or assessing the alteration's impact is incorrect. This fails to meet the fiduciary duty owed to the property owner and could lead to significant financial losses if the alteration devalues the property or causes structural damage. It also violates HRS Chapter 521 by potentially allowing an alteration that could compromise the property's habitability or violate building codes. Another incorrect approach is to summarily reject the tenant's request without any consideration or discussion. While the owner has the right to control their property, a blanket refusal without exploring potential compromises or assessing the alteration's merits can lead to tenant dissatisfaction and potential disputes, potentially violating the spirit of fostering a positive landlord-tenant relationship as encouraged by HRS Chapter 521. Furthermore, if the alteration is minor and beneficial, rejecting it outright might be a missed opportunity for the owner. Finally, an approach that involves approving the alteration based solely on the tenant's assurance that it will be done professionally, without any independent verification or owner consultation, is also professionally unacceptable. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to protect the owner's interests. It bypasses the essential steps of risk assessment and owner authorization, which are critical components of responsible property management under Hawaii law. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the tenant's request and its potential implications. This involves gathering all necessary information, assessing risks and benefits from the owner's perspective, consulting relevant regulations, like HRS Chapter 521, and communicating transparently with both the tenant and the owner. The ultimate decision should be informed by a comprehensive analysis and align with the property owner's objectives and legal requirements. Question 9. System analysis indicates that a licensed real estate broker in Hawaii, who is currently representing a seller under an exclusive right-to-sell listing agreement, is approached by a prospective buyer interested in purchasing that same property. What is the broker's immediate and most critical obligation under Hawaii's real estate licensing laws and ethical guidelines? Option A. Begin representing the buyer exclusively, terminating the seller's agency relationship without prior notification to the seller. Option B. Immediately disclose the existing seller representation to the prospective buyer in writing, explain the implications of potential dual agency, and obtain informed written consent from both the seller and the prospective buyer before proceeding with any representation of the buyer. Option C. Inform the seller that a buyer is interested and allow the seller to decide whether to accept the buyer's offer without further disclosure from the broker. Option D. Proceed to negotiate the sale on behalf of the buyer, assuming the buyer's interests are aligned with the seller's in this specific transaction. The correct answer is B. Immediately disclose the existing seller representation to the prospective buyer in writing, explain the implications of potential dual agency, and obtain informed written consent from both the seller and the prospective buyer before proceeding with any representation of the buyer. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a real estate licensee to navigate potential conflicts of interest inherent in representing parties with opposing goals. The licensee must prioritize clear communication, informed consent, and adherence to Hawaii's agency disclosure laws to maintain ethical and legal standing. The best approach involves the licensee recognizing the inherent conflict and immediately disclosing the potential dual agency situation to both the seller and the prospective buyer. This disclosure must be in writing and clearly explain the implications of dual agency, including the limitations on the licensee's ability to advocate for either party's best interest to the same extent as a single agent. Obtaining informed written consent from both parties before proceeding with any representation is crucial. This aligns with Hawaii Revised Statutes, Chapter 467, and associated administrative rules, which mandate disclosure of agency relationships and prohibit undisclosed dual agency. The licensee's duty is to facilitate the transaction while remaining neutral and fair to both parties, ensuring neither is disadvantaged by the licensee's dual role. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with representing the buyer without fully disclosing the existing seller representation and obtaining consent. This violates Hawaii's agency disclosure requirements and could lead to accusations of misrepresentation or breach of fiduciary duty to the seller. The licensee would be failing to uphold their obligation to act with undivided loyalty to their client. Another incorrect approach is to attempt to secretly represent both parties without any disclosure. This is a direct violation of Hawaii's real estate licensing laws and ethical standards. Such conduct constitutes fraudulent behavior and would likely result in disciplinary action, including license revocation and potential civil liability. Finally, an incorrect approach would be to unilaterally decide that the buyer's offer is acceptable to the seller and present it as such without proper disclosure of the dual agency. Even if the offer is favorable, the licensee's role as a dual agent requires neutrality and cannot involve making judgments or recommendations that favor one party over the other without explicit, informed consent. Professionals should approach such situations by first identifying any potential conflicts of interest. They must then consult the relevant Hawaii Revised Statutes and administrative rules regarding agency disclosure. The paramount principle is transparency and informed consent. If a dual agency situation arises, the licensee must immediately inform all parties in writing, explain the implications, and obtain their express written consent before continuing. If consent cannot be obtained, or if the conflict is too significant, the licensee should consider withdrawing from representing one or both parties to avoid ethical and legal breaches. Question 10. The performance metrics show a 10% increase in the median home price in Honolulu County, Hawaii, from $800,000 to $880,000 over the past year. Concurrently, the average 30-year fixed mortgage interest rate has risen from 3.5% to 5.5%. A potential buyer is considering purchasing a median-priced home. What is the approximate increase in the monthly principal and interest payment for this buyer compared to 1 year ago, assuming a 20% down payment? Option A. The monthly principal and interest payment has increased by approximately $260. Option B. The monthly principal and interest payment has increased by approximately $880. Option C. The monthly principal and interest payment has decreased by approximately $200. Option D. The monthly principal and interest payment has increased by approximately $550. The correct answer is A. The monthly principal and interest payment has increased by approximately $260. Explanation. The performance metrics show a significant increase in average home prices in Honolulu County, Hawaii, over the past year, alongside a notable rise in mortgage interest rates. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a real estate broker to interpret complex economic indicators and advise clients on market conditions and potential investment strategies, balancing the allure of rising prices with the deterrent of higher borrowing costs. Careful judgment is required to provide accurate and ethical guidance that aligns with Hawaii's specific real estate market dynamics and regulatory environment. The best professional approach involves calculating the monthly mortgage payment for a hypothetical median-priced home, considering both the current average home price and the prevailing interest rate, and then comparing this to the previous year's payment. This method directly addresses the impact of both rising prices and interest rates on affordability, which is a critical factor for potential buyers and sellers in Hawaii's unique market. This approach is correct because it provides a tangible, data-driven assessment of market accessibility for buyers and potential return on investment for sellers, directly reflecting the economic factors influencing real estate transactions in Hawaii. It aligns with the ethical duty of a Hawaii-licensed broker to provide competent and diligent service, ensuring clients understand the financial realities of the market. An incorrect approach would be to solely focus on the percentage increase in home prices without factoring in the rising interest rates. This fails to provide a complete picture of affordability and could lead to misleading advice, as higher prices become even more burdensome with increased borrowing costs. This approach is ethically flawed as it omits crucial economic data that directly impacts client decisions and could violate Hawaii's real estate licensing laws requiring brokers to act with honesty and integrity. Another incorrect approach would be to advise clients that the market is guaranteed to continue appreciating at the same rate, ignoring the potential dampening effect of higher interest rates on demand. This constitutes speculative advice that is not grounded in a comprehensive analysis of current economic conditions and could lead to significant financial losses for clients. Such advice is professionally irresponsible and potentially violates the duty of care owed to clients under Hawaii real estate regulations. A further incorrect approach would be to recommend that clients delay purchasing or selling solely based on the rising interest rates, without considering other market factors or individual client circumstances. This is an overly simplistic reaction to one economic indicator and fails to acknowledge that market conditions are multifaceted. A professional decision-making process should involve a thorough analysis of all relevant economic factors, client goals, and risk tolerance, providing a balanced perspective rather than a knee-jerk reaction. Professionals should use a framework that prioritizes data analysis, client-centric advice, and adherence to regulatory standards to navigate such complex market scenarios. Question 11. Analysis of financing options for a real estate investor in Hawaii. A Hawaii-licensed broker must evaluate the suitability of hard money loans and seller financing, which approach best upholds the broker's professional and ethical obligations to the client. Option A. Recommend a hard money loan as the fastest way to acquire the property, emphasizing the speed of closing without extensively detailing the associated high costs and short repayment terms, and assuming the investor is aware of the risks. Option B. Advise the investor to pursue seller financing, focusing on the potential for lower upfront costs and more flexible terms, without emphasizing the need for formal legal documentation or independent legal review of the agreement. Option C. Present both hard money loans and seller financing as equally viable options, suggesting the investor choose based on personal preference without providing a detailed analysis of the financial implications or recommending professional consultation. Option D. Provide a detailed explanation of the typical terms, interest rates, fees, and repayment structures of both hard money loans and seller financing, highlighting the potential benefits and significant risks of each, and strongly advise the investor to consult with independent legal and financial professionals before making any decisions. The correct answer is D. Provide a detailed explanation of the typical terms, interest rates, fees, and repayment structures of both hard money loans and seller financing, highlighting the potential benefits and significant risks of each, and strongly advise the investor to consult with independent legal and financial professionals before making any decisions. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a Hawaii real estate broker to evaluate financing options for an investor client, specifically focusing on hard money loans and seller financing, while adhering to Hawaii's regulatory framework for real estate transactions and ethical obligations to the client. The broker must ensure that the advice provided is not only financially sound, but also compliant with disclosure requirements and avoids misrepresentation or undue influence. Careful judgment is required to balance the investor's potential need for speed and flexibility with the inherent risks associated with these types of financing. The best professional practice involves thoroughly explaining the characteristics, advantages, and disadvantages of both hard money loans and seller financing to the investor client. This includes detailing the typical interest rates, fees, loan terms, collateral requirements, and the potential for higher costs and shorter repayment periods associated with hard money loans. For seller financing, the broker must explain the negotiation process, the importance of a clear promissory note and mortgage or deed of trust, and the potential for the seller to retain an interest in the property. Crucially, the broker must emphasize that these are complex financial instruments and recommend that the investor consult with independent legal and financial advisors before committing. This approach aligns with Hawaii Revised Statutes Chapter 467, Real Estate Brokers and Salespersons, and the National Association of Realtors Registered Code of Ethics, which mandate competence, honesty, and the duty to advise clients to seek expert assistance when needed. Recommending a hard money loan without a comprehensive discussion of its high costs and short-term nature, and without advising the client to seek independent legal and financial counsel, is professionally unacceptable. This fails to meet the duty of care and could be construed as steering the client towards a potentially detrimental financing option without adequate disclosure of risks. Similarly, advising the investor to accept seller financing without a thorough explanation of the legal documentation required, promissory note, mortgage/deed of trust, and the potential implications of default, or without recommending independent legal review of these documents, is also professionally unsound. This neglects the broker's responsibility to ensure the client understands the contractual obligations and potential legal ramifications, suggesting that either financing option is inherently superior without a detailed analysis of the investor's specific financial situation, risk tolerance, and investment goals, and without recommending independent professional advice, is also a failure to act in the client's best interest and could violate ethical standards. Professionals should approach such situations by first understanding the client's objectives and financial capacity. They should then educate the client on the available financing options, clearly outlining the pros and cons of each, with a particular focus on the regulatory and ethical considerations relevant to Hawaii real estate. A critical step is always to advise the client to seek independent legal and financial counsel to review any loan documents or agreements, thereby ensuring the client makes an informed decision and protecting the broker from potential liability. Question 12. The review process indicates that a client in Honolulu, Hawaii, is concerned about the additional monthly cost of private mortgage insurance, PMI, on their proposed home purchase. As their real estate broker, what is the most appropriate and ethically sound course of action to address this concern? Option A. Advise the client that PMI is an optional insurance that can be disregarded, and it will automatically be removed by the lender over time without any specific action required from them. Option B. Offer to contact the lender directly to negotiate a lower PMI rate for the client, assuring them that you have experience in securing better terms. Option C. Explain that PMI is a lender requirement, not set by the broker, and advise the client on how they can work with their lender to explore options for PMI cancellation or reduction once specific equity thresholds are met, in accordance with federal guidelines and lender policies. Option D. Minimize the impact of PMI by stating it is a small, temporary cost that will not significantly affect their long-term financial goals. The correct answer is C. Explain that PMI is a lender requirement, not set by the broker, and advise the client on how they can work with their lender to explore options for PMI cancellation or reduction once specific equity thresholds are met, in accordance with federal guidelines and lender policies. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a real estate broker in Hawaii to navigate the ethical and regulatory implications of private mortgage insurance, PMI, when advising a client. The broker must balance the client's immediate financial concerns with the long-term implications and legal requirements surrounding PMI, ensuring transparency and adherence to Hawaii's real estate licensing laws and ethical standards. The core of the challenge lies in providing accurate, unbiased information without engaging in practices that could be construed as misrepresentation or a breach of fiduciary duty. The best professional approach involves clearly explaining to the client that PMI is a requirement from the lender, not the broker, and that its cost is determined by the lender based on the borrower's risk profile. The broker should then advise the client that they can explore options with their lender to potentially reduce or eliminate PMI, such as making a larger down payment or requesting PMI cancellation once sufficient equity is established. In accordance with federal law, Homeowners Protection Act of 2013, and lender policies, this approach upholds the broker's duty of full disclosure and client advocacy by empowering the client with accurate information and actionable steps, all while respecting the lender's role in setting loan terms. This aligns with Hawaii's real estate regulations that mandate honesty, integrity, and full disclosure in all dealings. An incorrect approach would be to suggest to the client that the broker can negotiate a lower PMI rate directly with the lender on their behalf. This is problematic because brokers are not authorized to negotiate loan terms or insurance premiums with lenders. Doing so could be seen as practicing law or engaging in unauthorized financial advising, and it misrepresents the broker's role and capabilities, potentially leading to a breach of trust and violation of Hawaii's real estate licensing laws, which prohibit misrepresentation. Another incorrect approach would be to downplay the significance of PMI and assure the client that it is a minor cost that will not impact their long-term financial goals. This is ethically unsound and potentially violates disclosure requirements. PMI is a direct cost to the borrower that affects their monthly payments and overall cost of homeownership. Minimizing its impact can lead to a client making a decision based on incomplete or misleading information, which is contrary to the broker's fiduciary duty and Hawaii's regulations requiring full and fair disclosure. Finally, advising the client that they can simply ignore the PMI requirement and that it will eventually be removed without any action on their part is also an unacceptable approach. This demonstrates a lack of understanding of how PMI works and the conditions under which it can be terminated. It is a misrepresentation of the process and could lead to significant financial repercussions for the client, violating the broker's duty to act in the client's best interest and adhere to professional standards. Professionals should approach such situations by first understanding the client's specific concerns and then providing clear, factual information about the relevant financial products and processes. They should always clarify their role and limitations and direct clients to the appropriate professionals, e.g., lenders, financial advisors, for specific advice outside their expertise. Transparency, honesty, and a commitment to educating the client are paramount in maintaining ethical practice and complying with regulatory requirements. Question 13. Performance analysis shows that a real estate broker in Hawaii is representing a seller whose property is adjacent to a proposed industrial development that may have significant environmental impacts. The broker's client is eager to sell quickly and is hesitant to disclose potential environmental concerns that might deter buyers. What is the most responsible and legally compliant course of action for the broker in Hawaii? Option A. Advise the client to ignore potential environmental impacts to expedite the sale, assuring them that buyers will likely overlook such issues. Option B. Recommend that the client proceed with the sale and address any environmental issues that arise after the transaction is complete. Option C. Personally assess the environmental impact based on general knowledge and inform the client of the broker's opinion on the severity of the issue. Option D. Advise the client to consult with qualified environmental professionals and legal counsel to understand potential environmental impacts and their implications under Hawaii's environmental laws before proceeding with the sale. The correct answer is D. Advise the client to consult with qualified environmental professionals and legal counsel to understand potential environmental impacts and their implications under Hawaii's environmental laws before proceeding with the sale. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a real estate broker in Hawaii to balance their fiduciary duty to a client with the complexities of environmental regulations, specifically the Hawaii Environmental Policy Act, HEPA. The broker must navigate potential environmental impacts that could affect property value and disclosure obligations, without overstepping their expertise or making unsubstantiated claims. Careful judgment is required to ensure compliance and protect the client's interests. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves advising the client to consult with qualified environmental professionals and legal counsel regarding potential environmental concerns and their implications under Hawaii's environmental laws. This approach is correct because it acknowledges the broker's limitations in environmental assessment and directs the client to the appropriate experts. It upholds the broker's duty of care by facilitating informed decision-making based on expert advice, thereby ensuring compliance with HEPA's spirit of transparency and informed public participation, even if indirectly through client education. It also protects the broker from liability by not providing unqualified environmental opinions. Incorrect approaches analysis. Advising the client to ignore potential environmental impacts to expedite the sale is ethically and legally unacceptable. This approach violates the broker's fiduciary duty to act in the client's best interest and could lead to non-disclosure of material facts, a violation of Hawaii real estate licensing laws, and potentially HEPA intent to inform stakeholders. Suggesting that the broker can personally assess the environmental impact based on general knowledge is also professionally unsound. Real estate brokers are not qualified environmental scientists or engineers. Making such assessments could lead to inaccurate conclusions, misrepresentation, and potential liability under Hawaii law. It bypasses the rigorous assessment required by HEPA for significant projects, recommending that the client proceed with the sale and address any environmental issues that arise later is a risky and irresponsible approach. This fails to proactively identify and mitigate potential problems, which could significantly devalue the property, lead to costly remediation, and expose both the client and the broker to legal repercussions for failing to disclose known or reasonably discoverable environmental concerns, contrary to the principles of responsible land use and development encouraged by Hawaii's environmental policies. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a framework of informed guidance and expert referral. When faced with situations involving specialized knowledge, such as environmental regulations, the primary responsibility is to identify the need for such expertise and guide the client towards qualified professionals. This involves understanding the scope of one's own license and expertise, recognizing the potential impact of external regulations like HEPA on real estate transactions, and prioritizing transparent communication and due diligence for the client's benefit and legal protection. Question 14. The monitoring system demonstrates that a real estate broker in Kailua, Oahu, is actively marketing a vacant parcel of land for a high-density residential development. However, the broker has not yet thoroughly investigated the specific zoning classification and potential land use restrictions applicable to this particular parcel under the City and County of Honolulu's land use ordinances, which are known to be stringent in coastal and environmentally sensitive areas. What is the most responsible and legally compliant course of action for the broker to take immediately? Option A. Advise the client that zoning is a minor hurdle that can typically be overcome with sufficient effort and that the marketing should proceed aggressively to attract interested buyers who might handle the zoning challenges. Option B. Continue marketing the property as planned, assuming that zoning issues can be resolved through the development process or by relying on general knowledge of Oahu's development trends. Option C. Focus marketing efforts on the land's general appeal and potential without explicitly mentioning the proposed high-density residential use to avoid prematurely raising zoning concerns with potential buyers. Option D. Immediately cease marketing the property for the proposed high-density development until a comprehensive review of the applicable zoning ordinances and land use regulations for that specific parcel in Kailua is completed, and then advise the client on the findings and feasibility. Correct answer is D. Immediately cease marketing the property for the proposed high-density development until a comprehensive review of the applicable zoning ordinances and land use regulations for that specific parcel in Kailua is completed, and then advise the client on the findings and feasibility. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a real estate broker to navigate the complexities of Hawaii's zoning laws and land use regulations, while balancing the interests of their client with the public good and legal compliance. The broker must understand that land use decisions are not solely driven by market demand, but but are heavily influenced by state and county planning ordinances designed to protect environmental resources, ensure public access, and manage development sustainably. The correct approach involves proactively researching and understanding the applicable zoning ordinances and land use regulations for the specific parcel of land in Kailua, Oahu. This includes identifying any existing or proposed zoning changes, special management areas, conservation districts, or development restrictions that might impact the client's intended use. The broker must then clearly communicate these findings to the client, advising them on the feasibility of their project within the existing regulatory framework, and recommending consultation with relevant county planning departments or land use attorneys if necessary. This approach is correct because it prioritizes full disclosure, due diligence, and adherence to Hawaii revised statutes and county ordinances governing land use, thereby protecting both the client and the broker from potential legal repercussions and ethical breaches. It upholds the broker's fiduciary duty to act in the client's best interest by providing accurate and comprehensive information. An incorrect approach would be to proceed with marketing the property for a high-density residential development without verifying its zoning classification and potential land use restrictions. This fails to acknowledge that Hawaii, particularly areas like Kailua, has specific land use plans and zoning ordinances that may prohibit or severely limit such development due to environmental concerns, infrastructure capacity, or existing community plans. This approach risks misleading the client and potential buyers, leading to wasted time, financial loss, and potential legal action against the broker for misrepresentation or negligence. Another incorrect approach would be to assume that because similar developments exist elsewhere on Oahu, the proposed project is permissible in Kailua. This overlooks the localized nature of zoning and land use regulations, which can vary significantly even within the same island. Each county and specific zoning district has its own set of rules, and failing to investigate the specific regulations for Kailua is a direct violation of professional due diligence and potentially state and county land use laws. A further incorrect approach would be to advise the client that zoning issues can be worked out or bypassed through informal channels without proper application and approval processes. This demonstrates a disregard for the established legal and administrative procedures for land use changes and development permits in Hawaii. Such advice could lead the client into illegal development activities, exposing them and the broker to significant penalties, including fines and stop work orders, and undermining the integrity of the land use planning system. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with a thorough understanding of the specific property's location and the relevant local zoning and land use regulations. This involves consulting official county planning department websites, reviewing zoning maps, and understanding any applicable special area plans or environmental regulations. If the intended use appears to conflict with existing regulations, the professional's duty is to inform the client of these potential obstacles and advise on the proper channels for seeking variances, permits, or amendments, including recommending expert consultation. Transparency and accuracy are paramount in fulfilling fiduciary duties and ensuring compliance with Hawaii's land use framework. Question 15. Investigation of a property listing in Honolulu, Hawaii, reveals that the seller is offering a condominium unit for sale. The property is advertised as having a long-term lease on the land beneath the building, which is owned by a separate entity. A prospective buyer, unfamiliar with Hawaiian real estate practices, inquires about the nature of their ownership. Which of the following approaches best represents the licensee's professional obligation in this situation? Option A. Clearly explain that the buyer will acquire ownership of the condominium unit itself, but not the underlying land, which is subject to a long-term leasehold agreement with specific terms and duration, and advise the buyer to review the lease documents with legal counsel. Option B. Market the property as a condominium sale, assuming the buyer understands that condominium ownership in Hawaii often involves leasehold land interests. Option C. Focus solely on the features and amenities of the condominium unit, without specifically mentioning the leasehold nature of the land, as this is a common practice in Hawaii. Option D. State that the buyer will own the property outright, as they are purchasing a condominium unit, and address any questions about the land lease only if directly asked by the buyer. The correct answer is A. Clearly explain that the buyer will acquire ownership of the condominium unit itself, but not the underlying land, which is subject to a long-term leasehold agreement with specific terms and duration, and advise the buyer to review the lease documents with legal counsel. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it involves navigating the complexities of property rights and ownership in Hawaii, specifically concerning the distinction between fee simple ownership and leasehold interests. A real estate licensee must accurately represent these different forms of ownership to potential buyers to avoid misrepresentation and ensure informed decision-making, which is crucial for maintaining client trust and adhering to regulatory standards. Failure to do so can lead to significant legal and ethical repercussions. Correct approach analysis. The best professional approach involves clearly and accurately distinguishing between fee simple ownership and leasehold interests when presenting property information. This means explicitly stating whether the property being marketed is being sold with full ownership of the land and improvements, fee simple, or if the buyer will acquire the right to use the land for a specified period under a lease agreement, with the underlying land remaining owned by another party. This approach aligns with Hawaii Revised Statutes, HRS, Chapter 501, and related real estate licensing laws, which mandate truthful and accurate representation of property conditions and ownership structures. It ensures that prospective buyers fully understand the nature of their potential investment, including the duration of their rights and any associated obligations or limitations inherent in a leasehold. Incorrect approaches analysis. Presenting a leasehold property as if it were fee simple ownership is a direct violation of HRS Chapter 501 and the principles of honest dealing required of licensed real estate professionals. This misrepresentation deceives buyers about the extent of their ownership rights and the long-term implications of their purchase. Similarly, failing to disclose the existence of a leasehold interest, even if the property is otherwise presented accurately, constitutes a material omission. Buyers have a right to know all material facts affecting the property's value and their ownership rights, and withholding this information is unethical and illegal. Lastly, assuming a buyer understands the nuances of leasehold versus fee simple ownership without explicit clarification is negligent. While some buyers may have prior experience, many will not, and it is the licensee's responsibility to ensure clarity and prevent misunderstandings, rather than relying on assumptions. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a framework of proactive disclosure and verification. This involves thoroughly understanding the ownership structure of every property listed, obtaining all relevant documentation, such as lease agreements, and clearly communicating these details to potential buyers in writing. When in doubt about a buyer's understanding, licensees should encourage them to seek independent legal counsel to review all ownership documents. This diligent approach safeguards both the client and the licensee from potential legal disputes and ethical breaches. Question 16. Comparative studies suggest that when evaluating a mortgage loan application in Hawaii, a broker's primary responsibility is to ensure the loan is both viable for the borrower and compliant with lender guidelines. Considering this, which of the following approaches best reflects the ethical and regulatory obligations of a Hawaii-licensed real estate broker during the loan underwriting and approval process? Option A. Approve the loan based on the borrower's promise of future income improvements, without requiring documented evidence to facilitate a quicker closing. Option B. Expedite the loan approval process by accepting the borrower's self-reported financial information at face value and overlooking minor inconsistencies to meet the borrower's urgent need for funds. Option C. Adjust the property appraisal to match the borrower's desired loan amount, even if it means presenting a valuation that is not fully supported by market data, to secure the loan for the client. Option D. Conduct a comprehensive review of the borrower's financial documentation, verify income and assets, assess the property's market value, and ensure the loan terms align with the lender's established underwriting criteria and Hawaii Revised Statutes. The correct answer is D. Conduct a comprehensive review of the borrower's financial documentation, verify income and assets, assess the property's market value, and ensure the loan terms align with the lender's established underwriting criteria and Hawaii Revised Statutes. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a broker to balance the borrower's immediate financial needs with the lender's risk tolerance and regulatory obligations. The broker must navigate potential conflicts of interest and ensure that the underwriting process adheres strictly to Hawaii's real estate licensing laws and lending regulations, particularly concerning disclosure and fair lending practices. Misjudging the underwriting process can lead to significant legal and financial repercussions for both the borrower and the broker. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a thorough and objective assessment of the borrower's financial capacity and the property's value, strictly adhering to the lender's established underwriting guidelines and Hawaii revised statutes. This includes verifying all submitted documentation, performing a comprehensive credit analysis, and ensuring the loan-to-value ratio is within acceptable parameters. This approach is correct because it prioritizes compliance with Hawaii's regulatory framework, which mandates that brokers act in the best interest of their clients while upholding ethical standards and avoiding predatory lending practices. It ensures that loans are approved based on sound financial principles and risk management, protecting both the borrower from over-indebtedness and the lender from undue risk. In line with the fiduciary duties expected of a licensed professional in Hawaii. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves prioritizing the borrower's desire for a quick loan approval over a rigorous underwriting process, even if it means overlooking minor discrepancies in financial documentation. This is professionally unacceptable, as it violates the broker's duty to conduct due diligence and could lead to a loan that the borrower cannot realistically repay, potentially contravening Hawaii's consumer protection laws. Another incorrect approach is to approve the loan based on a verbal assurance from the borrower about future income increases without obtaining verifiable documentation. This bypasses essential underwriting steps and exposes the lender to significant risk, failing to meet the standards of prudent lending and potentially violating regulations that require documented evidence for loan approval. A third incorrect approach is to approve the loan by significantly inflating the appraised value of the property to meet the borrower's requested loan amount, even if the broker suspects the appraisal is overly optimistic. This constitutes a misrepresentation and a breach of ethical conduct, potentially violating Hawaii's real estate and mortgage lending laws that prohibit fraudulent practices and require accurate property valuations. Professional reasoning. Professionals should employ a systematic decision-making process that begins with understanding the specific requirements of the lender and the applicable Hawaii revised statutes. This involves meticulously reviewing all borrower documentation, conducting independent verification of financial information, and performing a realistic property valuation. If any discrepancies or red flags arise, the professional should seek clarification, request additional documentation, or, if necessary, decline to proceed with the loan application rather than compromising the integrity of the underwriting process. Transparency with both the borrower and the lender throughout the process is paramount. Question 17. The investigation demonstrates that a licensed real estate broker in Hawaii is marketing a property that includes a single-family dwelling, a detached garage, and a small, fenced area currently used by the owner to grow produce for personal consumption and occasional sale at a local farmer's market. The broker is considering listing this property under the agricultural classification due to the produce cultivation. What is the most appropriate classification for this property under Hawaii's real estate regulations? Option A, agricultural due to the presence of produce cultivation. Option B, residential with potential disclosure of ancillary agricultural activity. Option C, commercial as the owner occasionally sells produce. Option D, industrial as the property has a detached structure. Correct answer is B, residential, with potential disclosure of ancillary agricultural activity. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a broker to accurately identify the primary intended use of a property to ensure compliance with Hawaii's real estate licensing laws and regulations, particularly concerning the distinct categories of real estate. Misclassifying a property can lead to significant legal and ethical repercussions, including disciplinary action from the Hawaii Real Estate Commission. Careful judgment is required to distinguish between the nuances of different property types, especially when a property might have characteristics of more than one category. The best approach involves a thorough understanding of the property's primary purpose and its zoning, as dictated by Hawaii law and local ordinances. This means assessing the predominant use for which the property is being marketed and sold. For instance, a property primarily intended for residential dwelling, even if it has a small detached workshop, would be classified as residential. This aligns with the regulatory framework that categorizes real estate based on its principal function to ensure appropriate disclosures, marketing, and transaction processes are followed. An incorrect approach would be to classify the property solely based on a secondary or potential use without considering the primary intent. For example, marketing a property that is clearly zoned and intended for single-family housing as primarily commercial simply because the owner occasionally ran a small home-based business from a portion of it, without proper commercial zoning or permits, would be a regulatory failure. This misrepresentation could mislead buyers and violate disclosure requirements. Another incorrect approach is to rely solely on the seller's subjective description of the property's use, without independent verification or consideration of zoning. If a seller claims a property is agricultural, but it is predominantly used and zoned for residential purposes, the broker has a duty to investigate further and adhere to the actual classification. Failing to do so constitutes a breach of professional duty and potentially violates Hawaii's real estate regulations. Finally, an incorrect approach is to ignore the specific definitions and distinctions between residential, commercial, industrial, and agricultural properties as defined by Hawaii law and local land use regulations. For example, a property with extensive acreage and agricultural infrastructure, but which is primarily being marketed for its potential as a large residential estate, needs careful consideration of its agricultural zoning and any associated restrictions or benefits. A broker must understand the legal definitions to avoid misclassification. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that prioritizes due diligence and adherence to regulatory definitions. This involves 1. Understanding the primary intended use of the property, 2. Verifying zoning regulations with the relevant local authorities in Hawaii, 3. Consulting Hawaii's real estate statutes and administrative rules for clear definitions of property types, 4. Disclosing all relevant information accurately to potential buyers and sellers, 5. Seeking clarification from the Hawaii Real Estate Commission if there is any ambiguity. Question 18. In Hawaii, a licensed real estate broker is tasked with valuing a distinctive, older residential property with several custom architectural features. The property is located in a desirable neighborhood, but has no direct comparable sales in the immediate vicinity. Considering the property's unique nature and the need for a market-relevant valuation, which valuation method would best serve the broker's professional duty to provide accurate and competent service to their client? Option A. Income approach, by estimating the potential rental income the property could generate and capitalizing that income. Option B. Cost approach, by calculating the cost to rebuild the property new and subtracting accrued depreciation. Option C. A combination of the income and cost approaches, as the property's uniqueness might warrant considering both its income potential and replacement cost. Option D. Comparative market analysis, by identifying the closest comparable sales and making necessary adjustments for the unique features and differences. The correct answer is D. Comparative market analysis, by identifying the closest comparable sales and making necessary adjustments for the unique features and differences. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge for a Hawaii real estate broker because accurately valuing a unique property requires careful consideration of multiple valuation methods. The broker must select the most appropriate method, S, based on the property's characteristics and the purpose of the valuation, while adhering to Hawaii's real estate licensing laws and ethical standards. Misapplication of valuation methods can lead to inaccurate pricing, potentially harming clients and violating professional duties. Correct approach analysis. The most appropriate approach in this scenario is the comparative market analysis. This method is best suited for residential properties, especially those with unique features, as it relies on comparing the subject property to similar recently sold properties in the same market area. Hawaii's real estate regulations, while not dictating specific valuation methodologies, emphasize the broker's duty to provide competent service and accurate information to clients. A comparative market analysis, and performed diligently with appropriate adjustments for differences, directly aligns with this duty by providing a market-driven estimate of value. It is the standard practice for residential appraisals and broker price opinions in Hawaii, reflecting current market conditions and buyer behavior. Incorrect approaches analysis. Using solely the income approach would be inappropriate for a unique residential property that is not primarily investment-driven. This approach focuses on the income-generating potential of a property, which is less relevant for a primary residence or a property valued for its unique characteristics rather than its rental income. Such an approach would fail to capture the market's perception of value for this specific type of property and could lead to a misleading valuation, potentially violating the broker's duty of care. Relying exclusively on the cost approach would also be problematic. While useful for new construction or special-purpose properties where comparable sales are scarce, it estimates value based on the cost to replace or reproduce the property, minus depreciation. For an older, unique residential property, accurately estimating depreciation can be highly subjective, and the cost to build a similar unique property might not reflect what a buyer is willing to pay in the current market. This method often overestimates value for older properties and does not directly reflect market demand, thus failing to provide a realistic market value. Professional reasoning. A Hawaii real estate broker should approach property valuation by first understanding the property type and the purpose of the valuation. For unique residential properties, the comparative market analysis is generally the most reliable starting point. The broker must then critically assess if other approaches, like the cost approach for unique construction elements or the income approach if there's a significant rental component, could provide supplementary insights. The broker's professional judgment, informed by market knowledge and regulatory requirements for competent service, dictates the selection and application of valuation methods. Transparency with the client about the methods used and their limitations is also crucial. Question 19. Risk assessment procedures indicate that the Hawaii real estate market is showing signs of shifting from a seller's market towards a more balanced or potentially buyer-friendly environment. As a licensed real estate broker in Hawaii, what is the most prudent and ethically sound approach to advising a client who is considering selling their property in the current climate? Option A. Conduct thorough research on local Hawaii market data, including inventory levels, recent sales, economic indicators, and demographic trends, and present this objective analysis to the client, discussing potential implications for their sale while managing expectations about future market performance. Option B. Advise the client to immediately list their property at a significantly higher price than current comparables, based on a personal conviction that the market will soon experience a substantial surge, and to hold firm on this price regardless of buyer interest. Option C. Recommend that the client withdraw their property from the market indefinitely, as the broker believes a major market downturn is imminent, and it would be financially irresponsible to sell now. Option D. Focus exclusively on national real estate news and forecasts, advising the client to follow broad national trends without specific consideration for the unique dynamics of the Hawaii real estate market. The correct answer is A. Conduct thorough research on local Hawaii market data, including inventory levels, recent sales, economic indicators, and demographic trends, and present this objective analysis to the client, discussing potential implications for their sale while managing expectations about future market performance. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a real estate broker in Hawaii to navigate the complexities of market cycles and trends while upholding their fiduciary duties to clients. The broker must balance advising clients on potential market shifts with the imperative to act in their best interests, avoiding speculative advice that could lead to financial harm. The dynamic nature of real estate cycles necessitates a proactive and informed approach, grounded in objective analysis rather than subjective predictions. Correct approach analysis. The best professional practice involves a broker conducting thorough, objective research into current and historical real estate market data specific to Hawaii. This includes analyzing local economic indicators, demographic shifts, inventory levels, and recent sales comparables. The broker should then present this data-driven analysis to the client, outlining potential market trends and their implications, while clearly stating that future market performance cannot be guaranteed. This approach aligns with Hawaii's real estate licensing laws and ethical standards, which mandate honesty, full disclosure, and acting in the client's best interest. By providing factual information and managing expectations realistically, the broker fulfills their duty of care and avoids misrepresentation. Incorrect approaches analysis. Advising a client to immediately purchase multiple properties based on a personal belief that the market is about to experience a significant upswing, without presenting supporting data or acknowledging potential risks, constitutes a failure to act in the client's best interest and a potential misrepresentation of market conditions. This speculative advice could lead to financial losses for the client if the market does not perform as predicted, violating ethical obligations and potentially Hawaii's real estate regulations regarding truthful representation. Recommending that client delay selling their property for an indefinite period because the broker anticipates a future market boom, without providing any concrete evidence or a defined time frame for this anticipated boom, is also problematic. This could cause the client to miss out on a favorable selling opportunity in the current market, again failing to prioritize the client's immediate best interests and potentially misrepresenting future market conditions. Focusing solely on national real estate trends and applying them directly to the client's situation in Hawaii, without considering local market specifics, is an insufficient and potentially misleading approach. Hawaii's real estate market has unique factors influenced by its island geography, tourism, and specific economic drivers. Ignoring these local nuances means the advice is not tailored to the client's actual circumstances and may not be accurate, violating the duty to provide competent and relevant advice. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that prioritizes objective data analysis and transparent communication. When advising clients on market cycles and trends, the process should involve 1. Gathering comprehensive, localized data. 2. Analyzing this data to identify observable patterns and potential implications. 3. Presenting findings to the client in a clear, unbiased manner, highlighting both opportunities and risks. 4. Clearly disclaiming any guarantees about future market performance. 5. Always ensuring advice is aligned with the client's specific goals and risk tolerance, and in compliance with all applicable Hawaii real estate laws and ethical codes. Question 20. Regulatory review indicates that a licensed real estate broker in Hawaii must complete 16 hours of approved continuing education, every 2 years, with at least 4 hours focused on Hawaii real estate law and regulations. The broker also notes that the Hawaii administrative rules limit attendance at REC-sponsored or approved seminars and workshops to a maximum of 12 hours per renewal period. If the broker completed 6 hours of approved Hawaii real estate law and regulations training, 8 hours of general approved real estate practice courses, and attended 4 hours of a REC-approved seminar on market trends, how many additional hours of approved continuing education must the broker complete to meet the biennial requirement? Option A, 4 hours. Option B, 0 hours. Option C, 2 hours. Option D, 6 hours. The correct answer is C, 2 hours. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires a real estate broker in Hawaii to accurately calculate and track continuing education, credits to maintain their license, while also managing client expectations and business operations. Miscalculating CE hours can lead to license suspension or revocation, impacting the broker's ability to practice and potentially causing financial harm to their clients and brokerage. The broker must demonstrate diligence and adherence to the Hawaii revised statutes and Hawaii administrative rules governing real estate licensure. The best approach involves proactively tracking CE credits throughout the license renewal period and utilizing official resources for verification. This includes maintaining detailed records of completed courses, ensuring they are Hawaii Real Estate Commission (REC) approved, and understanding the specific credit limitations for different types of activities. For example, the Hawaii administrative rules specify that a maximum of 12 hours of CE can be earned from attendance at REC-sponsored or approved seminars and workshops per renewal period. Furthermore, the rules stipulate that a broker must complete 16 hours of approved CE every 2 years, with at least 4 hours in Hawaii real estate law and regulations. By meticulously logging these credits and cross-referencing with the REC's guidelines, the broker ensures compliance and avoids last-minute rushes or errors. An incorrect approach involves relying solely on memory or informal notes to track CE credits. This method is prone to human error and can lead to underreporting or overreporting of credits, both of which are violations. Failure here is a lack of systematic record-keeping, which is implicitly required for compliance with licensing regulations. Another incorrect approach is assuming that any real estate-related course counts towards CE requirements. The Hawaii REC specifically approves courses, and courses not on the approved list, even if relevant to real estate, will not satisfy the CE mandate. This demonstrates a misunderstanding of the regulatory definition of approved continuing education. A further incorrect approach is waiting until the license renewal deadline to determine the number of CE hours needed, and then attempting to complete them all at once. This not only creates undue stress, but also increases the likelihood of selecting non-approved courses or being unable to find suitable approved courses in time, leading to non-compliance. This approach fails to recognize CE as an ongoing professional development requirement throughout the entire licensing period. Professionals should adopt a proactive and systematic approach to managing their CE requirements. This involves creating a dedicated system for tracking completed courses, noting the course provider, date of completion, and the number of credits earned. Regularly reviewing the Hawaii REC's official website for updates on CE requirements and approved courses is also crucial. When in doubt about a course's eligibility or the total number of credits earned, contacting the Hawaii Real Estate Commission directly for clarification is the most prudent step. This ensures accurate compliance and maintains the integrity of their professional license.